एक छोटे से कमरे में होते हैं और अपने-अपने लोग।
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. 6 Palestinians are killed as Israeli troops open fire near a US-backed aid centre in southern Gaza, with both sides blaming each other for the violence. The incident comes amid dozens of deaths this week at the site, as the UN blames the aid system for putting civilians in danger. US President Trump orders 2,000 National Guardsmen to Los Angeles as immigration raid protests turn violent for a second night. The White House blames Californians' feckless Democratic leaders for allowing lawlessness to fester. Russia launches a fierce drone and bomber assault on Kharkiv, killing 4 and injuring nearly 60. The strikes also hit Kherson and other parts of Ukraine. Ukraine urges allies to step up support as Moscow claims the attacks were retaliation for strikes on Russian railways and air bases. Presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe is shot 3 times and twice in the head during a campaign event in Bogota, Colombia, say paramedics. The 39-year-old right-wing senator is in critical condition as political tensions in Colombia escalate ahead of next year's election. The Madeleine, a boat carrying aid for Gaza, is less than 24 hours from Palestinian waters, says MEP Rima Hassan, defying Israel's naval blockade. Greta Thunberg joins 11 others aboard the Freedom Flotilla vessel as Gaza faces crippling food shortages under a 90-day siege. President Trump declares his relationship with Elon Musk is, quote, over, calling the tech billionaire disrespectful after a public falling out over his tax bill. Trump warns Musk of serious consequences if he backs Democrats, as their once close alliance unravels in a fierce social media feud. Britain's Foreign Minister David Lammy meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Delhi to strengthen counter-terrorism cooperation after deadly India-Pakistan clashes. Lammy's visit comes ahead of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's trip to finalise a trade deal with India. Iran says its intelligence has obtained sensitive Israeli documents, including files on nuclear facilities, state media reports. Israel has not responded, but the leak may tie to last year's reported hack of an Israeli nuclear research site. Our top story today: the United States believes that Russia's full response to Ukraine's drone attack last weekend is still to come. US officials warn that Moscow's retaliation will likely be a significant multi-pronged strike involving missiles and drones. Potential targets could include Ukrainian sites such as government buildings. Experts suggest that Russia may also target Ukraine's domestic security agency and defense manufacturing centers. However, some caution that Russia's military capabilities are increasingly stretched. Meanwhile, in Russia's Tula Oblast, the Azot chemical plant in Novomoskovsk has been struck again by a drone, causing a fire. This is the second attack on the plant since the month of May. While 2 people have reportedly been injured, their lives are not in danger. Ukrainian forces have consistently launched drone attacks deep within Russian territory, including a significant strike on Russian military airfields earlier this month, severely damaging several key aircraft. We turn to Latin America for our next story. Colombian presidential candidate and opposition senator Miguel Uribe was shot and seriously wounded during a campaign event in the capital of Bogota. Paramedics say the 39-year-old was shot 3 times, including twice in the head and once in the knee. He was airlifted to hospital and remains in serious condition, according to local media. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio condemned the attack, calling it a direct threat to democracy, and blamed what he described as violent leftist rhetoric from Colombia's government for fueling the climate that led to the attempted assassination. Colombia's defense minister confirmed that one suspect had been arrested and investigations were underway to determine whether others were involved. Police later said a minor had been detained at the scene, received medical treatment and was now in custody. Let's listen in to what the Colombian police director had to say.
El cual resultó lesionado en la pierna. Este menor fue trasladado a la clínica Colombia, donde se le está prestando asistencia médica. Fue incautada un arma de fuego tipo Glock, la cual se encuentra en cadena de custodia. Actualmente se adelantan los actos urgentes en el lugar de los hechos, entrevista a personas, testigos de este hecho que rechazamos. Estamos en este momento, como le indiqué al principio, en una revisión exhaustiva en el lugar de los hechos, con todas las capacidades institucionales para, digamos, ubicar y capturar a las personas que cometieron este detestable y abominable hecho en contra del senador Miguel Uribe.
The U.S. State Department said in a statement that the United States condemns the strongest possible terms the attempted assassination of Senator Uribe and called for accountability. Uribe's party, the Democratic Center, described the shooting as a serious attack on democracy, while his wife called on the country to pray for his survival. Authorities have offered a multi-million peso reward for information on the attack. We now move over to the Middle East, where tensions continue to escalate in Gaza as 6 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded by Israeli gunfire near a U.S. Israeli-backed aid center. The incident occurred while civilians gathered for food distribution in southern Gaza. The Israeli army claims it fired warning shots after suspects approached in a threatening manner. This comes as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, halted operations citing threats from Hamas, a claim Hamas denies. The United Nations has criticized the new aid distribution system, calling it dangerous and ineffective. Back in Israel, thousands protested on Saturday, demanding the return of hostages and condemning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war. And in a grim warning, Hamas's armed wing claims the Israeli military has surrounded the location of hostage Matan Zanguake, but vowed he would not be retrieved alive. This is what the emotional mother of the hostage said. We're now joined by Spencer Critchley, who is a Democratic communications strategist. He's located in California. Thank you very much, Spencer, for joining us on the program. Over the past few days, Spencer, as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has taken into effect, these deaths seem synonymous with the foundation's name. Does it need a complete overhaul, do you think? Is this foundation equipped to deal with the scale of the operation that providing aid to Gazans needs?
I don't think it should be necessary for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to be stepping in like this, and that the reason that they are is because the Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu is failing in its fundamental responsibility to feed the civilians in Gaza. For all the horrors that Hamas is guilty of, Netanyahu is making it hard to tell the difference between the two sides in this conflict, and essentially deliberately starving the people of Gaza can only be described, I'm afraid, as a war crime. And I really never thought I would be accusing Israel of this kind of behavior, but I am far from the only one. We all certainly understand Israel's right to defend itself, and never more than after the truly awful attacks of October 7th, but it does not have a right to defend itself through the commission of war crimes, including the starvation of civilians. And to use live ammunition on desperate people trying to get food for themselves and their families is just a part of this. It's utterly terrible, and it's obviously, first of all, terrible for the people directly affected, but it's also terrible for the state of Israel. Netanyahu is making Israel an international pariah. It's enormously damaging for Israel as well.
Spencer, we got in the news yesterday, actually, that the US is pondering supplying the GHF with a further $500 million in funding. As we've previously discussed, these incidents seem to be reoccurring with the organization. What do you think about the Trump administration's response to these news updates? Do you think it should demand an independent inquiry into the organization that it's funding?
I think that the Trump administration needs to behave better than it has shown any inclination to do under any circumstances, these circumstances or others. And I wish I could say differently in this case too. The United States frequently is called upon to play the role of honest broker and to apply diplomatic pressure to de-escalate conflict and to resolve humanitarian crises. The United States used to be first on the ground assisting with humanitarian crises, but of course, since Elon Musk and Donald Trump dismantled our aid efforts, that has suddenly stopped. So again, I think we can point to whatever problems there are with this particular organization, but I think the larger problem is that there is a void for them to be stepping into which should not exist.
Spencer, on a broader scale, how do you reconcile America's strategic partnership with Israel, with the rising civilian death toll in Gaza, the obvious, the multiple atrocities that Israel is accused of, especially around these aid sites? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's very damaging to the United States as well. I have to add that I'm disappointed with the Biden administration's role in this conflict as well. Throughout the Biden administration, especially after October 7th, I continued to hope to see more clarity about how the Biden administration would be putting pressure on Netanyahu to live up to the standards of a liberal democracy. Certainly defend itself, certainly go after Hamas. But as month after month went by, and it became clearer and clearer that Netanyahu apparently has no interest in ending this war anytime soon, and one has to speculate is largely motivated by his own political self-preservation more than any desire to defend the people of Israel, notably including the Israeli hostages. Now with the Trump administration, it's even worse, because with Donald Trump, you can just rely on him to be a toxic combination of purely impulsive and self-interested and devoid of any larger strategic or moral vision in the question of international affairs. So this is also extremely damaging to the reputation and credibility of the United States.
Spencer Critchley, pleasure to get your insight. You are staying with us. We now move over to the United States, where tensions escalate in California after President Donald Trump deploys 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles, overriding State Governor Gavin Newsom's objections. The move comes after days of intense protests against federal immigration raids that saw tear gas, flashbangs and arrests in multiple locations, including Paramount and Compton. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has put Marines at Camp Pendleton on high alert, warning of a possible deployment if violence continues. Governor Newsom called the move inflammatory, saying California has sufficient law enforcement to maintain order. Amid the chaos, ICE claimed it arrested over 100 immigrants, including suspected gang members, while immigrant advocates and lawmakers condemned the crackdown. Protesters and rights groups say the federal presence is escalating and not easing the unrest in Los Angeles. This is what Angelica Salas from the Coalition of Humane Immigrant Rights had to say.
People were being arrested and continue to be arrested right here in the courtroom where they were seeking justice and they were seeking their process. What I also want you to know is that none of the operations that we have reported on had any warrants with people's names on it, with the name of the businesses. They were random sweeps and they were picking up our community in random sweeps. They were racially profiling our community. So I want you to know, and I want this president to know, and I want every elected official in this country to know, being brown, being black, being Asian, looking like an immigrant does not make you criminal.
We're once again joined by Spencer Critchley to discuss this in further detail. Spencer, how concerning is it that President Trump overrode Governor Gavin Newsom's objections to deploy federal troops? Does this set a dangerous precedent?
Oh, it absolutely does. And people who don't live in the United States might need a little extra information to understand just why this is so serious. The last time this was done was in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson, when I believe it was the state of Alabama refused to protect the civil rights of black Americans. It's an extraordinary seizure of state power by the federal government that's only to be used, according to the law, in the event of a rebellion against the government of the United States of America, is essentially what needs to be happening. In other words, a complete breakdown of civic order or an attack on the government of the United States. Furthermore, the right of peaceful protest in the United States is sacred, and yet Donald Trump finds it offensive to his authoritarian instincts. During his first administration, you may remember there was an entirely peaceful protest in front of the White House, and Trump was asking General Mark Milley, one of his most senior military leaders, why the troops, why U.S. troops couldn't shoot at these protesters and if not kill them, do something like try to shoot them in the legs. This is just incredible in the American context. I can tell you, I have personal experience working with police agencies dealing with large-scale protests here in California. And I'm proud of the police agencies I worked with. Notably, the chief of one of them made a point of saying that it was the role of his department to protect the peaceful protesters, not to attack them. If there was violence, of course, the police need to step in and stop the violence, and well-trained American police departments are entirely capable of doing that sort of thing. And they're far better trained to do it than military forces are. And here we have President Trump not only nationalizing the California National Guard, which is guaranteed to escalate the situation and make it far more dangerous, but Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talking about using active duty federal military troops against American citizens. Now, there has been some violence in these protests, and there should not be such violence, and it is illegal to interfere with law enforcement operations. But these incidents are reportedly scattered, and there is nothing going on that remotely approaches the need for a nationalized National Guard presence, and certainly not the U.S. military.
Spencer, I want to get your brief analysis on the difference between the Trump administration and the previous administrations in regard to ICE's actions. Trump has said that he plans to deploy the biggest deportation operation in U.S. history. How do you think that's going down with the American public? Obviously, California did not vote for Donald Trump, but can I get your thoughts on the actions of these immigration forces in America since Trump took office in January?
Well, it seems clear they're becoming increasingly unpopular, including among people who voted for Donald Trump. A famous case this week was the arrest and deportation of a woman from Hong Kong who, yes, was apparently in the country illegally and had been for something like 20 years, but who was a beloved member of her small town, a town where apparently something like 80% of the population had voted for Donald Trump. But as many of them said, we did not vote for this. Trump, ginned up panic about a supposed invasion of terrorists and drug dealers and human traffickers in the United States, and said that what he was going to do was go after the most dangerous criminals who had come into the country illegally. And many people who believed him understandably thought that sounded like a good idea. But of course, that's not what he's doing. We've seen that he's been deporting people to this gulag-style prison in El Salvador, the great majority of whom are apparently guilty of no crime at all. And this is typical of most of the people who are being rounded up in these raids. These raids in Los Angeles are targeting people looking for work in front of a hardware store, which is a common sight in California, is to see immigrants standing in front of these large hardware stores hoping to find some work for the day, working on construction sites and this sort of thing. And also reportedly targeting meatpacking plants and other places that tend to employ illegal immigrants. Again, yes, these people are here illegally, but they're there because they're needed, and they were essentially welcomed in, and they are working. These are not criminals. And so as more and more Americans realize what's actually going on here, more and more of them reject it.
Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure having your insight on the programme. We stay in the United States for our next story. US President Donald Trump says his relationship with tech billionaire Elon Musk is over. In an interview, Trump was asked if he thought his close relationship with Musk had ended. Trump replied in the affirmative, stating, "I would assume so, yes." When asked if he had any wish to repair the relationship, Trump said no. The comments follow a public falling out between the two men that unfolded over social media this week. The feud began after Musk, who donated heavily to Trump's campaign and served in his administration, criticized Trump's signature tax and spending bill, calling it a disgusting abomination. Trump later accused Musk of being disrespectful to the office of the president and said that he was very disappointed in the tech mogul's behavior. In the same interview, Trump warned that Musk would face very serious consequences if he funds Democratic candidates to run against Republicans who back the bill. Asked what those consequences might be, the president declined to elaborate. We move on once again. The North Atlantic Council has officially nominated U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Alexis G. Grenekowicz as the new Supreme Allied Commander Europe, currently serving as the Director for Operations of the Joint Staff. Grenekowicz will take over from General Christopher Cavoli following national confirmation processes. The change of command ceremony will happen in Mons, Belgium. Meanwhile, in Germany, top officials warn that Russia could be ready to launch a large-scale attack on NATO by 2029, with a focus on the Baltic region. To counter this, Germany is accelerating its military overhaul with plans to boost defence spending and add thousands of new soldiers by 2031. NATO partners, including the US, are also pushing for increased military budgets, aiming for a 3.5% GDP commitment by 2032. More updates on this crucial defence shift are expected at the upcoming NATO summit. We once again turn to the Middle East, where Iran claims it has obtained a massive cache of sensitive Israeli intelligence, including files on Israel's nuclear facilities and defense plans, though no evidence has been provided. Iranian state media and pro-Iran outlets say the intelligence was gathered in a covert operation involving images, videos and documents that were transferred securely to Tehran. Two Israelis, Roy Mazhari and Almog Atias, were arrested in April for allegedly collecting intelligence in the town of Kfar Ahim, where Defence Minister Israel Katz resides. Authorities believe the pair were in contact with Iranian operatives, one of them even moving what's believed to be an explosive device. Israeli security officials say this is the latest example of a growing Iranian espionage network aimed at recruiting Israeli citizens to undermine national security. Well, that is all we have time for, and we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.